Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kirsten Snow. I am the Communications Director for the Keystone Research Center. And today we are joined by the folks who wrote this particular paper on green locomotives and the jobs impact for Northeastern Pennsylvania and also perhaps across the country. For that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Herzenberg, who is going to tell us a little bit about why we're here. And then we'll dive into the presentation and we will take questions from the media at the end. Steve? Unmute, Steve.
Thanks, Kirsten. So I'm an economist and the executive director of the Keystone Research Center, and also the co-director of Reimagine Appalachia. I'm delighted to be here on behalf of Keystone Research and Reimagine Appalachia, which is a climate action campaign that Keystone helped catalyze in 2020. Reimagine highlights the potential of investments in reducing carbon emissions to create jobs, including good union jobs, in a four-state region that includes extractive communities that have remained persistently poor for decades, and places like Erie, Pennsylvania, that thrived during the New Deal, but have experienced enervating downward mobility since that prosperity because of the loss of good manufacturing jobs, including on the site of the current Wabtec facility. The 2020 blueprint of Reimagine Appalachia recognizes the critical importance of upgrading existing rail and laying new lines for an Appalachian rail corridor. It recognizes that doing this vital work and building the green locomotives for a modernized rail system across the country can build local wealth and put tens of thousands of people to work, restoring opportunity in places like Erie. For these reasons, I was delighted a couple of months ago to receive a call from UE President Carl Rosen, who was seeking researchers who could do rigorous analysis of the jobs and economic impact of expanding green locomotive production at the Wabtec facility in Erie, Pennsylvania. I connected Carl to our nation's premier modeler of the economic impacts of climate action investments, Perry, at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Perry had already conducted comprehensive studies for Reimagine of the jobs impact of implementing our blueprint in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, as well as countless other highly regarded studies. With that, I will turn it over to Perry's Gregor Semieniuk, the lead author of Perry's Green Locomotive study being released today. Gregor, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to share my screen here as I've prepared a little presentation. I hope my screen is now visible. Okay. Yeah, right. As Steve was saying, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. It was a great honor to do this report, which we prepared here at the Political Economy Research Institute at UMass Amherst, titled Employment Creation Through Green Locomotive Manufacturing at Wabtec's Erie, Pennsylvania facility. Here I'm presenting the key findings, and this is co-authored with the Institute co-director Robert Poland and myself. First of all, what is green locomotive manufacturing? What are green locomotives? Well, we consider two types of locomotives here. The first one is a Tier 4 diesel electric locomotive, which has 50 to 90% less pollution than the Tier 0 locomotive during operation, where Tier 0 is the first regulated locomotive by the EPA, regulated by the EPA, has to fulfill certain standards, and a lot of these locomotives are still on American rails today. So green compared to that locomotive. And the second one is a battery electric locomotive, which runs entirely on, as it says, a battery, and that has no pollution during operation if the battery is charged on renewable energy. With a new focus on, or a renewed focus on low emission railroads in the United States and elsewhere in the world, we can expect a high demand for these locomotives that should result in increased production at Lawrence Park, among other places. So how much can Lawrence Park produce? Well, we can look at history to understand the capacity to build locomotives at Lawrence Park. In 2008, at peak production, the plant produced about 1,000 locomotives per year. And after that, of course, with the Great Recession, but also the subsequent events, this production declined. The good news is the plant and equipment still exists. Really what's needed is additional workers if production was to be ramped up. And so in our report, we're considering production increasing first to 500 locomotives per year, and then back after 2-3 years to 1,000 locomotives per year as it was in 2008. You know, this 2-3 year lag is due to, you know, having to hire people, having to organize production, you know, set up supply chains. But I'm going to present here the employment results for this full 1,000 locomotives production. And again, there's more details and the results can be viewed in the report PDF. Okay, we have a scale of production. How many jobs does that create? Well, we calculate that this actually creates 3,400 to 5,100 jobs at the Lawrence Park facility itself. The range is because it depends on what type of locomotive is produced and also to what extent the supply chain, particularly battery manufacturing, is actually located on site, or whether these batteries are sourced from elsewhere, which of course would then create jobs elsewhere. So this is our range, definitely thousands of jobs required to make 1,000 locomotives per year at the facility itself. But that is not all, because we also have, as I already mentioned, indirect jobs in the supply chain. So for instance, for battery manufacturing, but also for, you know, transporting intermediate inputs to the facility, making some of the intermediate inputs, mining of metals, and so on and so forth. And moreover, we have also induced jobs from spending of the wages that the workers at Lawrence Park and in the supply chain make. And that, of course, creates jobs in the wider economy. We do all of this using what's called an input-output model. And again, you can read about that in the report. Here, just a few of our key findings. In particular, the total employment effects. So you have already seen the Lawrence Park jobs, you know, low-end estimate, 3,400 jobs, high-end estimate, 5,100 jobs really required to make these locomotives. But then we have about an equal amount of other jobs in the supply chain induced through spending of the wages on, you know, anything from real estate agents to cinemas and takeaway food and in supermarkets and so on and so forth, everything. We have another 3,000 to 5,000 jobs, roughly the same number. So you add these two numbers together to get total job creation in Erie County. And then we also have the same phenomenon in the rest of the economy of Pennsylvania, because not everybody lives in Erie County, or perhaps people go to Philadelphia for a weekend or order things from there, or Pittsburgh. And of course, also in other states, right? Ohio is right next door, and New York State. And so overall in the US economy, we calculate a job creation through manufacturing 1,000 locomotives per year of roughly 10,000 to 15,000 jobs. Now, of course, we already have some employment at the facility. So some of these jobs are really already there because they would, of course, contribute to making these 1,000 locomotives. So in terms of new jobs, we have to subtract the 800 workers already employed in rolling stock manufacturing currently at the facility. So then a new full-time employment at the facility would be about 2,600 to 4,300 jobs. That's new jobs that aren't currently there. And these jobs are also well paying. As an example, a Lawrence Park metal worker could expect to make on average $75,000 per year in wages. That's not no compensation, you know, beyond wages, such as benefits is included in that. And that's compared with $45,000 per year, the median wage. So what the, you know, the person, when you line up everybody in the Pennsylvania economy and the one in the middle, what that person would make. So considerably higher, more than 1.5 times higher. But also we would see an employment boost, of course, as I mentioned, to the wider Erie County. And here you already saw that there's about a similar number of new jobs would be created outside the facility, but within the county. And these total new jobs are really on the order of current unemployment in the county of 7,000. So that unemployment could be expected to go down quite a bit. Moreover, it would likely that locomotive expansion would likely lead to an increase in the labor force, that is people working or actively looking for work in the county, because people would maybe move to Erie County or search again, or maybe move back. And I'm saying move back because as recently as 2008, the labor force in Erie County was 15,000 persons higher than it is today. And that has a lot to do with the decline in locomotive manufacturing, where some people may have moved to elsewhere to look for jobs and may perhaps want to move back to fulfill some of these very well-paying jobs. So in summary, we have a production of 1,000 green locomotives a year. That production creates about 3,400 to 5,100 jobs at the Lawrence Park facility. About 2,600 to 4,300 of these jobs are new. And in addition, there would be thousands of jobs in the rest of Erie County, and there would also be jobs in the rest of Pennsylvania and the United States, including, of course, new jobs corresponding to this new economic activity at the facility. And these jobs are on the whole well paid, and they raise the average wage in Erie and Prosperity in the county. And also, there would be a considerable drop in unemployment in Erie County with a likely labor force expansion. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Gregor. Let's see, give me 1 second to get organized here. Next, we're going to hear from the president of the United Electrical Workers nationally, Carl Rosen.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to the Keystone Research Center and Reimagine Appalachia for helping put this study together, and especially thank you to Gregor and everyone at Perry who did this great work. Our union, the United Electrical Workers, is very committed to this project to ensure that green locomotives start getting built at scale and getting built in Erie at the Wabtec facility. This is needed to help tackle climate change. It's life-saving for those who live and work around the rail yards. And it can obviously, as Gregor just outlined, provide good union jobs for the folks who would be building these in Erie. From our own experience, we can tell you there are rail yard workers, including thousands who are UE members, who are every day having to breathe in the fumes from locomotives that the rail companies still have on in those yards that are 30, 40 years old. And it's unconscionable that pollution is going out there, and it's also going into the surrounding communities. So we're bringing together a national coalition of labor, community, and environmental groups to demand that the railroads upgrade their locomotives and to demand that the government do its job to make sure the locomotives are not making people sick and not contributing to climate change. And this is really also an issue of racial justice, because the rail yard communities that surround those yards are frequently primarily working class people of color, and they're being poisoned by these diesel fumes. We are glad to note that the Environmental Protection Agency at the federal level is starting to look at this issue. They've just proposed a rule that would allow states to set higher emission standards. And in fact, at least one state, and a very important one, is ready to jump on that, which is the state of California. In fact, their air control board is voting later this week on a proposal to require that all locomotives operating in California over the next few years be converted to be at least at Tier 4 standards, and that the older ones be put out of commission. In other words, any railroad that wants to operate in the state that has the largest economy in the U.S. would have to use exclusively what we're calling green locomotives. The facility in Erie is the place that has the workforce, has the capacity to build green locomotives on the scale that our country needs. Gregor just walked through that. And Wabtec clearly has the resources to make the necessary investments in the facility, in the workforce, to make that happen. Recently, they've spent $750 million on stock buybacks alone. When you can put that kind of money into supporting Wall Street, you can certainly put real money in making sure that your facility in Erie can produce green locomotives. And that's what we're calling on them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. We're going to hear next from the local president of the union in Erie, Scott Slauson.
Thank you, Stephen. First, I'd like to thank the Keystone Research Center and Reimagine Appalachia for their help with this. Special thanks to Gregor and all the hard work at Perry. We really appreciate that. As well as a thank you to Senator Casey, who has been a believer and a supporter of our project. So that being said, I mean, cleaner, safer, green locomotives are the future of rail transportation, which is why in 2019, we launched the Green Locomotive Project. Our country has no choice but to address the climate crisis, and a key piece of that is moving more transportation onto rail, which has a significantly lower carbon footprint. Our aim is to reduce that even more, making freight rail the cleanest, most efficient form of transportation. In 1998, the EPA first adopted the tier-based system that Gregor talked about, Tier 0 being the oldest and dirtiest, and Tier 4 being the cleanest and most fuel efficient to date, which became mandatory in 2015. When the tier standard was implemented, the EPA projected around 30% of the mainline heavy haul locomotives would be Tier 4 by 2023. And today, the reality is less than 10% of them meet that requirement. But the railroads are still running a majority of the old dirty locomotives, and of the nearly 25,000 heavy haul freight locomotives operated by Class 1 freight carriers, a vast majority of them are the older diesel engines, which do not conform to today's standards. This is not only pumping unnecessary carbon into the air, but it also fills the rail yards with the diesel exhaust and other pollutants affecting the health of rail yard workers, but also those that live and work in the nearby communities. We are already building the cleanest, most fuel efficient locomotives in the country right here in Erie, the Tier 4 locomotive. And that again has reduced carbon emissions by 50 to 90% when compared to the older, lower tiered locomotives, thousands of which are still out there running the country's rails. We're also building and testing zero emission type locomotives, such as the FLX battery operated locomotive, which could easily be used to entirely remove diesel exhaust and other pollutants from rail yards and significantly reduce carbon emissions overall. The members of UE Local 506 are the most skilled locomotive builders right here in America, if not the world, having a combined 20,000 years of experience. In addition, this facility, as Carl mentioned, is significantly underutilized, and we believe it should be put to use building Tier 4s, as well as the next generation of cleaner zero emission locomotives that are desperately needed in our country. Wabtec has an opportunity to be part of the solution to our nation's climate changes. We're creating thousands of good family sustaining wage jobs right here in Erie, as well as our surrounding communities, as this report shows. This is going to require the company to work with us in the upcoming negotiations to make sure that our highly skilled union workforce is fairly compensated. A company that doesn't just hear, but listens, respects, and values the input of the thousands of years of experience of our workforce, and remembers that people are always their number one assets. Every job is important to us. Family sustaining wages are important to us. And as this report shows, it significantly benefits the community, our region, and our state economy, as well as the United States. We are optimistic. We believe the future is bright for Erie. We've always felt that way, but we need the company to listen and work with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We're now going to hear from Kyle Hannan, who works for Senator Casey out of Erie, and in fact is even from Erie. Kyle.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Carl and Scott, for inviting me and for allowing me to speak to you all on behalf of Senator Casey today. As Senator Casey says, we do not have to choose between good jobs and meaningful action to address the climate crisis. The idea that we can only pick one is a false choice. Any climate action must also include job creation, as well as the promotion of the right to organize, achieve better wages, and higher labor standards. This report demonstrates that tackling the climate crisis and making our railroads cleaner and safer, we can do exactly that. So Senator Casey was proud to work with Wabtec, Carnegie Mellon University, to further this goal through the Freight Rail Innovation Act, and commends UE's leadership in putting this vision forward. Senator Casey remains committed to advancing the deployment of green locomotives and looks forward to working with his Senate colleagues to get this bill over the finish line. With that, I want to thank you all for inviting me and for allowing the Senator to speak a few words today. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Scott. And thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, that wraps up our speakers. Let me now turn things back to Kirsten Snow, who, if we're gonna take questions now, but she will facilitate questions. You can put them in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute and directly ask your question.
Thank you, Steve. If anyone from the media has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and direct a question to any one of our speakers, or like Steve said, you can place them in the chat. I will also place my email address in the chat if anybody wants to reach out to me after the fact. We will also have this video available on our website, along with the actual report and the presentation that Gregor gave. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing all this information. We appreciate those of you in the media for joining us. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to me via email, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.